Hello guys, welcome back to A Page in the Chapter, or welcome if you are new here. My name is Paige and today it is time for my April wrap up. Now April was quite a busy month for me. There were a lot of birthdays, there were a lot of working because of the bank holidays, and there was also the magical hopathon, which is my favourite readathon of all time pretty much. It is a Disney parks type of readathon. It is a read books to go on rides type of readathon, and it is just so genuinely fun. And I had an absolutely fantastic time with this readathon. I didn't read a lot in terms of the amount of books that I read or things like that, but I had such a genuinely fun time reading all of these books. I gave all of them high ratings. Like, I just had so much genuine fun and was excited to read all of the time. I don't even mind. Like, the amount doesn't really matter that much after I've had so much fun and been so motivated to read, and it's all because of the magical hopathon, because I didn't read anything before the magical hopathon, and the minute it ended I didn't really read either, so it was all readathon related. Maybe I just need to do readathons every single month to stay motivated. I read 4 books in the month of April. Not my best, also not my worst. And whilst I did only read 4 books, one of them was 700 pages long. So really we can count that as 2 books because it essentially was. And I'm really proud of myself for being able to finish that book as long as 3 others within the 2-week timescape for this readathon. But I didn't even give myself the full 2 weeks because the readathon fell over Easter weekend. So that is my boyfriend's birthday, my boyfriend's brother's birthday, and you know, working more hours because it's a bank holiday weekend, so it just wasn't really geared up to be a successful couple weeks for me, but I still did really well given the time that I had. So if you guys like seeing wrap-ups every month, then I do post them every single month, and they're all in a playlist that you can go and check out. Or you can also hit that big red subscribe button down below and stay tuned for future content. I upload TBRs and wrap-ups every single month, and I post a video every single Wednesday and Friday, so you do not want to miss that. There's no shortage of bookish content here for you to enjoy. You guys can also check me out on Instagram and Twitter at Page and Chapter if you would like to see my reviews of books and what I'm reading in real time without having to keep waiting for these types of videos to be uploaded once a month. Do feel free to do that if you are interested. And without further ado, let's get into the books that I read in the month of April. The very first book that I read for the readathon was The Fine Print by Lauren Asher. This is book 1 in the Dreamland Billionaire series, and it had to be my entrance prompt for the readathon because this is a book set in like a Disney World type of setting. For the purposes of copyright, I'm assuming it's called Dreamland, but it's this big massive theme park based on animated movies that is in Florida. It's pretty much Disney World. And so it was just so fitting for this readathon that I had to read it. So this follows our main character Rowan, and the following books follow Rowan's brothers. And Rowan's grandfather is this very Walt Disney type of figure, was in love with animation and built this huge empire around it. And unfortunately early on in this book, Rowan's grandfather passes away, and he leaves them all kind of a set of requirements that they have to fulfill in order to access their inheritance, and each brother has a different task, and then their book follows that said task. And so Rowan's task is that he has to go and be the director of Dreamland for 6 months and highlight any weaknesses in the park and present a new idea to bring Dreamland into the future to a board of like anonymous people, and if these people vote unanimously in favour of his proposals, then he will get his share of his inheritance. And then we also have our main character Zara, who dreams of being like a Dreamland creator but has very much lost all of her confidence. And one time when she is drunk, she submits a proposal tearing down Dreamland's like biggest ride, and this gets her a job as a creator working under Rowan. And he is very, very grumpy and guarded, and she is very, very sunshine, sees the magic in the world and adores everything to do with Dreamland. I didn't think that I would enjoy this whole billionaire aspect as much as I did. It was very champagne problems, but I actually really enjoyed it. I thought the pacing of this book was a little bit all over the place. Lauren Asher was clearly trying very hard to not do the whole 80% conflict rule. Her doing that did kind of mess with the pacing a little bit. It was a little slow in the beginning, and then it really started to pick up and I was really rooting for it, and then there was a conflict very early on which kind of slowed everything down, and then they fixed it, and then there was another conflict, and it was just, the pacing just felt a little bit off to me. I will also say Lauren Asher's spicy scenes are not my favourite. There's these ones. I have also since read Terms and Conditions, which I will be talking about a little bit later, and they were not quite it for me as well. Like, they're good spicy scenes, like there's nothing wrong with them, but I've read like ones that kind of get me hot and bothered a bit more than Lauren Asher's do. But all in all, I actually really enjoyed this book. I would recommend giving it a try, although the second book, in my opinion, is a little bit better. As I said, I'll get into that a bit later. In terms of like good fun romance with a very like interesting setting, then I do think the fine print does it really well in terms of incorporating this setting as well. But all in all, a very good book. I do recommend it. And then the next book that I read for this readathon was a reread of Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. I reread this just before the series dropped on Netflix. I have not watched the series yet. To be honest, I'm very, very nervous to watch the series, but I had a great time with this reread, as you can imagine. Like, Heartstopper doesn't ever miss. It was good fun the first time I read it. It was good fun this most recent time that I read it. I don't think volume 1 is personally my favourite. I do think they get a little bit better as Nick and Charlie start to develop more of a relationship. I just prefer seeing once they're already like established rather than these early like will they won't they days, which is not typical for me. I normally prefer a will they won't they, but I just think that the comics get a lot more fleshed out and just, in my opinion, better the further you go. This is still a 4-star read. I still have a great time with it, and Heartstopper can do no wrong. So then the next book I picked up was another reread. I'm really feeling the rereads at the moment, I've got to say. And so this was New Moon by Stephanie Meyer, the second book in the Twilight series. Do I even have to tell you what this book is about? Like, surely you guys know. I once again had a really good time with this book. I actually genuinely always enjoy my rereads of these books. I don't find them to be as cringy as I find the movies. I just really actually enjoy the books. The only problem with New Moon is that every time I read New Moon, I have a very different opinion of Bella and the portrayal of the love triangle. So sometimes I read this book and I'm like, yes, Bella never really has any feelings for Jacob, so the movies really exploit this whole love triangle thing, and I hate that about it. But then other times I read this book and I'm like, yes, whilst Bella doesn't have any feelings for Jacob, there are multiple comments made by Bella about how she's kind of intentionally leading Jacob on, and could she learn to love him, and just like little hints that she knows exactly what she's doing, but she just kind of can't stop herself from doing it. And so every time I reread this book, Bella just becomes more and more of a bitch in my opinion, and I can't really stand her as a character in this book. That being said, I do still really enjoy it. I absolutely adore seeing Bella and Jacob's friendship play out. I kind of wish that Stephanie Meyer had just left it alone and left it as a friendship. And I think in some ways I actually prefer Bella being with Jacob. I think we get to see so much more, because we get to see so much more of their friendship. We actually see them doing things together, and we actually see how their interactions play out and why they make a good friendship slash potential couple, because we get to see those things. Whereas with Bella and Edward, I think Stephanie Meyer tries a little bit too hard to portray it as this like lifelong, eternal love that Edward's been searching for hundreds of years, and it's this big, massive romance, and it's a love like no other. And so there's a lot of like really, really cringy lines and references to Shakespeare and things like that. And in reality, I think their relationship would have come across a lot better if we could have actually just seen them interact in a normal way, because the basis of relationships is kind of a friendship, and they should do friendshipy things as well as just sit there and declare their love for each other. But all in all, I did have a good time rereading this book. I really can't complain. I don't know if I'm going to continue with my reread, because I do think that Twilight and New Moon are my personal favourites. Yeah, honestly, if you're thinking of rereading the Twilight books, go for it, because the movies, a hell of a lot cringier than the books, trust me. It's not as bad once you get into the books. And then the final book that I read for the Magical Hopathon, I did vlog my experience of reading this one, so I won't go into too much detail. And that is A Conjuring of Light by V.E. Schwab. This is the third and I want to say final book in the Shades of Magic trilogy. I do believe that V.E. Schwab is writing another book in this world, but I think it's a spin-off and not a continuation. Series is referred to as a trilogy, and the whole central plotline of this trilogy does wrap up at the end of this book. Not entirely sure what's going on there, but I think I finished this series. I think I finally got a series off my series tracker. And honestly, I loved this book. I was very, very nervous about it being 700 pages long and that I would get bored, and I found the second book in this series to be so silly in terms of plotline that I was just kind of waiting for this book to get boring or keep following the same pointless plotline, but it honestly didn't. It was genuinely so much fun to read. I feel like you should just discount the second book or look up a brief plot of what happens in the second book, because there is only one event in the second book that you need to know about. So I would just read the first one and this one, call it a duology and call it a day. This one just pretty much follows on from the first book, and there's not that much of a reference to the second book, and the second one feels very, very out of place in this trilogy. But this book very much goes back to its roots, goes back to this very political landscape, and the discussions of politics and battle strategy were very, very interesting and kind of really kept me engaged. And whilst there was this one big overarching plotline that I was worried would get boring for 700 pages, it led them on so many different adventures that it became very, very interesting. And by this book there just isn't a character that I hate. You kind of grow so attached to all of the characters that there are no plot points or no plot perspectives where you're just oh god, I really wish that this wasn't a thing. I feel like every single character has an interesting plot point and plot thread that you want to follow every time you get to their perspective, and it's very fun seeing all of the different characters that you've met over the 3 books kind of be thrust together into this final one, and they're all holding back things from each other and they're all keeping secrets from each other that some of them we know about and some of them we don't know about. Just seeing them having to have this trusting merry band of thieves relationship when none of them can actually trust each other it's really fun to see it play out. So essentially the Shades of Magic trilogy follows our main character Kel, and he is one of 2 people in the entire universe who can travel between the 3 alternative realities of London. So there is a Red London, where our main character is from, which greatly accepts magic, believes that magic chooses people and magic is a source of power. And then you have Grey London, which is essentially the London that we all live in, that doesn't believe in magic or really accept magic. Magic is not a thing in Grey London. And then you have White London, that does accept magic but kind of believes that anyone who doesn't have magic should be killed and is always on the brink of political collapse. And then once upon a time there was a Black London, but Black London became so engulfed by magic that it basically disintegrated and burnt from the inside out. This book is a continuation of that plotline. I really don't want to give anything away, but it's honestly really, really good, and I'm so happy that I read a 700-page book in such a small amount of time. But it's also a credit to how good this book was. I feel like V.E. Schwab just didn't let me down with this book. I ended up giving it a 4 stars and I just had a really, really good time. So if, like me, you hated the second book in the Shades of Magic trilogy, just keep going and just pretend the second book doesn't exist, because this was so much better. And then the final book I would like to talk to you about, you kind of already know about. I didn't read this book for the Magical Hopathon. I actually technically read it in May. I read it right at the changeover, but I'm just going to talk about it for April because I think I'll forget about it otherwise. And that is Terms and Conditions by Lauren Asher, The Dreamland Billionaires, Book 2, the sequel to the fine print. This follows the oldest brother, Declan, who is set to become CEO of essentially Disney. The whole Disney corporation, not just the theme parks. The condition for Declan becoming CEO is that he has to get married and have children, otherwise he can't become CEO, which seems a little silly, but I promise when you actually read it, it does kind of make sense and is explained in a fairly good way. I was very nervous about this book because this book is obviously not in this dreamland setting, and it was very much the Disney-like setting that drew me to the first book in the first place, and I was quite nervous going into this book, but I will say that this book is better. Declan ends up being in a fake marriage with his assistant Iris because he scares everyone else away and she's the only one who will agree to marry him for lots and lots and lots of money. But despite the fact that she's his assistant, they do actually already have like a working friendship of sorts, so not only is it a fake marriage, but it is friends to lovers. And I'm not normally one for friends to lovers, but this book really, really worked for me. I felt like the fact that they already had a foundation prior to the book meant that their banter was top-notch. There wasn't this whole like meeting element that can sometimes be very boring. Like you were just kind of thrust straight into the story, and I think that worked really well and helped with a lot of the pacing issues that I had with the first book. And I just genuinely think that this book was more enjoyable despite the fact that it didn't have the dreamland setting. And our characters do go and visit dreamland, so you do still get a little bit of it in this book. Again, whilst I found the sexy, spicy scenes to be enjoyable, they didn't necessarily get me hot and bothered. I wasn't like obsessed with them, but they were fairly enjoyable. I would say read the fine print just so you could read terms and conditions, really. As with any romance series, you don't have to have read the previous books to understand this one. It is essentially a standalone, but there are like elements of this book that I do feel like you would need the first one to understand. So I really, really enjoyed this book. I am super duper excited for when the third one comes out, and honestly, I'm sad that there's not more brothers for me to read about because, as I said, the whole billionaires thing is just really working for me. Definitely a 4 to a 4.5 star read. Genuinely amazing time with it, so I can't complain. And so there we have my April wrap up and all of the 5 books that I read in the month of April. Although technically the last one was kind of in May, but no one has to know. Let me know what you guys think of these books, how you rated these books down in the comment section. I would love to hear about it. Any more romance recommendations are always appreciated. I am on quite the romance kick right now, so I would not mind you guys leaving any ones similar to like the Dreamland Billionaire series down in the comment section. I am already aware of Lauren Ash's other series. I've ordered it, don't worry. And so yeah, just let's have a chat about some books down in the comment section. I feel like I haven't had a chat with you guys in a really long time, so it would be nice. If you guys enjoyed this wrap up and you would like to see more, I post a wrap up and a TBR every single month, and I post videos every Wednesday and Friday, so there is no shortage of bookish content here for you to enjoy. So do please feel free to hit that big red subscribe button down below so you don't miss out on any of that content. You just wouldn't want to. I've got some really fun ones coming up, I promise. I hope you guys are having a fantastic week, you are enjoying everything that you are reading, and there are no reading slumps in your future. And I will see you next week for my next video. Bye guys.